Welcome to HardScript.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. She said, stop asking for touch, like it was an inconvenience. Like affection had become a chore on her to-do list. That was the night I realized something had gone cold in her long before the words left her mouth. My name's Mark Jensen, 42, blue-collar, steady job, never missed a mortgage payment. I wasn't looking for grand gestures, just warmth. The small things. A kiss before work, her hand brushing mine at dinner, a quiet reminder that we were still on the same team. But somewhere along the way, those gestures disappeared, replaced by distance disguised as exhaustion. She used to tell me she was just tired. At first, I believed her. I picked up extra chores, handled the bills, cooked dinner. I told myself marriage came in seasons, and this was just a cold one. But seasons change, this one didn't. Weeks turned into months. The house grew silent, except for her footsteps moving from room to room like we were two tenants sharing space, not a marriage. One night, after another rejected touch, I finally asked what she wanted from me. She looked up from her phone, sighed, and said, "Stop asking for touch." I didn't argue. I just nodded, stood up, and said, "Then stop expecting support." It was quiet after that. No shouting, no slammed doors. Just the hum of the refrigerator and her disbelief filling the air. I packed a small bag that night. My clothes, my laptop, my tools. She didn't ask where I was going. I think part of her assumed I'd be back once I cooled off. But I wasn't angry. I was done. I drove through the night with no destination, just headlights and clarity. When you stop being needed as a man, you become invisible. And I'd been invisible for too long. By dawn, I parked outside an old diner off the highway, ordered black coffee, and stared out the window at the world moving on without me. For the first time in years, I felt something unfamiliar, peace. I wasn't running from her. I was walking back toward myself. She thought I'd cave, thought I'd return once she realized the bills wouldn't pay themselves. But I'd already made up my mind. I'd rather face silence alone than rejection beside someone who's forgotten how to care. The next morning, I checked into a cheap roadside motel. The kind with flickering lights and walls that hold too many stories. I didn't care. It wasn't home, but it was quiet. I brewed weak coffee from a packet, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at my phone. Her name sat at the top of my messages, unread and silent. No calls, no texts, nothing. For 12 years, I had been the provider, the steady one. The man who fixed the leaks, covered the bills, kept the world from collapsing. I didn't do it for gratitude. I did it for love. But somewhere along the line, the giving became expected, routine. And once love turns into obligation, it starts to die in silence. I thought she'd call by noon. She didn't. By evening, I sent her a single message, rent's due next week. Handle it. 2 minutes later, 3 dots appeared, then vanished. That was her way, always on the edge of communication, never fully present. I didn't send another word. I didn't need to. The next day, I went to work as usual. My coworkers noticed the change, said I looked calmer, sharper. One of them asked if I was finally taking a break from married life. I didn't answer. People think silence means pain, but it can mean clarity too. That evening, I drove past the house. The porch light was on, the curtains drawn. Through the window, I saw her sitting alone on the couch, scrolling through her phone, same as every night. She looked bored, but beneath that, there was something else, fear. Not of losing me, but of losing what I did for her. I didn't stop, didn't knock, just drove past. Over the next few days, messages started coming in. First practical ones. Where's the insurance card? Did you pay the water bill? Then emotional ones. We need to talk. You're being childish. And finally, silence again. That's the thing about people who withdraw love. They expect support to stay. But when you take away both, they start to realize what's left, an empty house and a cold bed. And I knew she'd start to miss the things she never appreciated, just not the man who provided them. The first week away felt strange. The kind of quiet that doesn't comfort you yet, but warns you you're in the right place. I started getting up earlier than usual, driving to work before sunrise, letting the stillness of the road clear my thoughts. For the first time in years, my mornings weren't filled with tension, just focus. No one asking for anything, no one withholding everything. By the end of that week, she called. Once. I let it ring out. A text followed, just 2 words, "We need." Then nothing. She couldn't even finish the sentence. I didn't respond. Instead, I drove to a small hardware store after work and picked up a few tools I didn't really need. There's something about fixing small, broken things that gives you back a sense of control. That night, I repaired an old watch I hadn't worn in years. As the ticking started again, it hit me: time doesn't heal you. It just gives you space to see who's worth healing for. 2 weeks later, I stopped by the house to grab some paperwork. My name was still on everything, so I had the right. When I pulled into the driveway, her car was there. But the yard was uncut, mail piled up, the little details I used to handle already slipping. I rang the bell. She opened the door wearing the same robe she used to lounge in, but the expression was different, nervous, uncertain. She didn't say hello, just crossed her arms. I stepped past her without a word, went straight to the desk, grabbed the folder, and left. She followed me to the door, asked if I was really not coming back. I said, "You told me to stop asking for touch." I listened. Her face froze. I think, for the first time, she realized I wasn't bluffing. That night, she sent another text. "This isn't fair." I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed one line and hit send. Fair ended when love became optional. I didn't hear from her for days after that. But I knew silence works both ways. She was feeling the absence now, not of me, but of everything my presence had built. And for the first time, I wasn't the one trying to fix what was broken. By the 3rd week, her messages turned from defensive to desperate. "I didn't mean it like that. You're overreacting. Can we just talk?" Each one arrived at night, when she knew I'd be alone. It was the same pattern: withdraw affection when she had control, reach for me when she didn't. But that cycle was over. I didn't respond. I'd already learned the most powerful word a man can say is nothing. At work, things were finally settling. My boss noticed my focus had sharpened. Said I looked lighter, more grounded. I didn't explain why. People mistake silence for weakness, but they forget silence is what soldiers use before precision strikes. That Friday, my paycheck came in. Normally, I'd transfer half into the joint account. Out of habit, I opened the app, but I didn't send a dime. I closed it, sat back, and waited. It took exactly 6 hours before the first message came in. "The rent's due." Then, "I can't cover it." Then finally, "Are you seriously not helping?" I didn't answer. By Monday, the tone had changed again. "You're punishing me. You're being cruel. You can't just leave me like this." But she was wrong. I could, because I already had, months before my body walked out of that house. One evening, I stopped by a friend's garage. He's a quiet guy, divorced, keeps to himself. He handed me a beer, asked how things were going. I told him the truth in one sentence. She stopped giving, so I stopped staying. He didn't ask for details. He just nodded like he'd heard it before. Driving back that night, I passed by the old house again. The lights were on, but this time I saw her pacing through the window. Phone in hand, face tense, moving like someone who'd finally run out of moves. For a moment, I almost felt pity. Then I remembered how many nights I'd lain beside her, feeling like a stranger. This was balance, not revenge, just the universe echoing back what she'd sent out. Love without warmth becomes debt. And when you stop paying it, the cold doesn't feel cruel. It feels fair. That night, I slept better than I had in years. A month after I left, the silence between us stopped feeling heavy. It started feeling like armor. The kind that doesn't weigh you down, it shields you. Every day, I worked, came home, ate dinner alone, and felt calm. There was no tension, no pretending, no guessing which version of her would walk through the door. Just peace. Then one night, my phone lit up again. A different number this time, but I knew it was her. The message was short: "I can't do this anymore." I read it twice, set the phone face down, and kept eating. That was the difference now. I didn't let her emotions dictate my movements. I wasn't heartless. I was done being manipulated by guilt disguised as love. A week later, she showed up at my job. I saw her standing by the fence when my shift ended, arms crossed, eyes red, trying to look composed. My coworkers noticed, but said nothing. I walked over slowly, no rush, no anger. She said she didn't recognize me anymore, that I'd become cold. I told her that wasn't true. I'd just stopped being warm to someone who mistook kindness for weakness. Her jaw tightened. She said she missed me. I told her she missed what I did for her. That was it. No shouting. No emotion, just truth. When I got back to my car, I sat there for a while, thinking about how strange it is when the tables turn. The same silence she used to punish me with was now her own cage. The same indifference she once hid behind had become the thing she feared most. Over the next few weeks, she tried again, calls, messages, even showing up at my motel. Each time, she looked smaller, her confidence stripped down to regret. But regret isn't love, it's realization. Eventually, she stopped trying. I think she finally understood that when a man like me goes quiet, it's not to hurt you. It's to end the game. I didn't celebrate. I didn't move on right away. I just existed. Quietly. Methodically. Because silence isn't the absence of feeling. It's the sound of a man rebuilding himself after being drained empty. And this time, I wasn't letting anyone take that from me again. 2 months later, the house went up for sale. I heard it through a mutual friend who still lived in the neighborhood. She couldn't keep up with the bills on her own, not after I stopped covering everything. The mortgage, the car payment, even the utilities, each one had my fingerprints on it. And now, one by one, they were slipping through her hands. I didn't gloat. I didn't even feel satisfaction, just a strange stillness. Watching someone drown in the same water they once refused to share isn't victory, it's confirmation. One night, she sent an email. Long, emotional, paragraphs of reflection and apology. She said she hadn't realized what she was doing to me. That she thought I'd always be there, no matter how cold she became. She wrote that she missed the sound of my voice, the smell of coffee in the mornings, even the silence between us before it turned into something dangerous. I didn't reply. I didn't even finish reading it. Because the truth is, apologies written out of desperation are just confessions of consequence. They don't rebuild what they destroyed, they just acknowledge the wreckage. Around that time, I moved out of the motel and into a small apartment near the edge of town. Nothing fancy, just a clean slate. The kind of place where the walls didn't remember arguments and the floor didn't creak under resentment. Work was steady. I'd started saving again. My coworkers stopped asking questions. They saw it in my posture, in the way I carried myself now. A man who'd been emptied, examined every piece, and chosen what was worth putting back. One Saturday, I drove past the old neighborhood. Her car was gone, the house dark, a for sale sign swaying in the wind. It didn't feel like loss. It felt like a reset. People think closure comes from confrontation. It doesn't. It comes from indifference. The quiet understanding that some stories don't need an ending. They just stop being told. That night, I poured myself a drink and sat by the window, listening to the hum of the city. No arguing, no rejection, no pretending. Just calm. She once told me to stop asking for touch. Now she was alone, touching nothing but unpaid bills and an empty bed. And for the first time, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt free. By the time the house sold, I'd stopped wondering what she was doing. Not out of anger, but because curiosity had finally been replaced by peace. That's how you know you've really moved on, when their absence doesn't itch anymore, when silence feels natural. Still, one night I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, but something told me to answer. Her voice came through the line, soft, unsteady. She said she didn't expect me to pick up. I said nothing. She told me she was staying with a friend, that things had gotten complicated, that she missed having stability, missed the way I used to take care of everything. I didn't respond. She filled the quiet with small talk, reaching for any version of connection left between us. But that connection had long been severed, cut not by cruelty, but by clarity. After a pause, she said she'd been seeing a therapist, trying to understand why she'd pushed me away. She said the woman told her she had emotional detachment issues. I let her speak. Then I said one thing. You didn't push me away. You erased me, and I stopped fighting to be seen. She went silent. I could hear her breathing, slow and uneven, and for a moment, I almost felt that old instinct to comfort her. But I didn't, because sometimes compassion is mistaken for invitation, and I wasn't opening that door again. She whispered that she hoped I could forgive her someday. I told her forgiveness had already happened, but reconciliation hadn't, and wouldn't. She asked if I'd ever loved her. I said, more than I should have. Then I hung up. Afterward, I sat in the dark for a long time, phone still in my hand, listening to the quiet hum of the city outside. It didn't feel like closure. It felt like the final breath of something that had already died long ago. I realized that night that peace doesn't come when they admit they were wrong. It comes when you no longer care whether they ever do. She used to control me with silence. Now, silence was mine, and it was louder than any apology she could offer. Weeks passed after that last call. No more messages, no more updates from mutual friends. It was as if she'd vanished from the map, and for the first time, I didn't feel the urge to look for her. I'd spent too many years tracing the outline of someone who was never really there. Now, I was learning to stand still. My routine became my anchor. Work, gym, evening walks through quiet streets where no one knew my story. Sometimes I'd see couples holding hands, laughing, existing in that effortless way I used to envy. But instead of bitterness, I felt gratitude. Because now I knew what that kind of peace required: honesty, effort, reciprocity. Things my marriage had lost long before I walked away. One morning, I got an email from the utility company. The old account, still in my name, had a past due notice attached. I almost ignored it, but curiosity made me click. The balance was small, but the address told me everything. She'd moved into a cramped apartment across town. I pictured her there, sitting at a small kitchen table, coffee gone cold, surrounded by silence that wasn't chosen but forced. The same silence she once gave me. I paid the bill, not out of kindness, but closure. Then I called the company and removed my name for good. I didn't know her another cent, another word, another piece of myself. That evening, I took a long drive in my truck. The one she used to complain was too loud. The radio was off, windows down, wind cutting through the stillness. I ended up at the lake, the same place we'd gone on our first anniversary. The dock was worn now, wood creaking under my boots. I sat there for a long time, watching the water shift under the fading light. It hit me then. She had never been the storm. I was. Because storms don't destroy, they cleanse. They clear the air so something new can grow. When I stood to leave, I looked out over the water one last time and whispered to no one. You taught me how to be alone, and I taught you what that really means. Then I walked back to the truck, started the engine, and drove toward the kind of silence that finally felt like home. A few months later, I got a message from her sister. She said my ex had fallen behind on rent again and was working nights at a diner outside town. I didn't ask for details, but the picture painted itself. The woman who once said she was too tired for affection now looked exhausted in a way comfort couldn't fix. I didn't reply. I wasn't cruel, just done. There's a difference. The kind of done that doesn't need closure or revenge. It's a quiet knowing that nothing you could say would change who someone really is. Life was simple now. My days had structure, and my mind had stillness. I'd started reading again, something I hadn't done in years. Books about resilience, solitude, the kind of stories that don't end with reconciliation but with rebirth. I realized how much of myself I'd lost in the routine of keeping someone else afloat. When you spend years trying to resuscitate a relationship that's been dead for months, you forget how to breathe on your own. One night, out of nowhere, she sent another message. No apology this time, no excuses. Just 3 words. I miss peace. It caught me off guard, not because of what she said, but because I finally understood it. She didn't miss me. She missed the peace my presence used to give her. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then deleted the message. Peace, I thought, is not a gift you owe someone who destroyed it. Later that week, I took a job offer in another state. Better pay, fresh start. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Just packed what I needed, left the rest behind. As I locked the apartment for the last time, I looked around and thought about how far I'd come, from begging for touch to finding comfort in solitude. Driving through the night, I realized something simple but absolute. She'd spent years shutting me out, mistaking distance for independence. Now she was alone for real, and it wasn't liberation. It was consequence. By the time the highway lights faded behind me, I wasn't running anymore. I was free, and the silence that used to haunt me had become the sound of a life finally rebuilt from the ashes of neglect. A year after I left, I stopped checking the past completely. Not because I forgot it, but because it no longer deserved my attention. That's what real healing feels like, not deleting memories, but outgrowing them. The move had been good for me. The new town was small, quiet, the kind of place where no one knew my story. I rented a house near the edge of the woods, spent my evenings fixing things, building small routines that grounded me. Every now and then, I'd catch myself enjoying the sound of rain hitting the roof, the kind of simple peace I used to crave and could never find in her silence. I never remarried. I didn't rush to fill the void. I wanted to learn what life looked like when it wasn't centered around keeping someone else comfortable. One night, I got a message from a number I didn't recognize. It was her again. A single photo this time. Our old house, empty, with the caption, "They finally sold it." She said she hoped I was doing well, that she was trying to rebuild, that maybe someday we could talk like friends. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. That story was finished. She wasn't the villain anymore, and I wasn't the victim. We were just two people who'd chosen silence for different reasons. She, to avoid connection, and me, to protect peace. Later that week, I drove out to a nearby lake, parked the car, and sat on the hood watching the sky fade to gray. I thought about how far I'd come since the night she said, "Stop asking for touch." I realized that what I wanted back then wasn't affection, it was acknowledgement, proof that I mattered. Now, I didn't need that from anyone. She cried over bills and cold nights. I built warmth with my own hands. They say love dies slowly. Maybe that's true. But sometimes, it doesn't die, it transforms. Into distance, into stillness, into something sharper, cleaner, more honest. When I finally stood to leave, I looked at the water one last time and said quietly, "You taught me what absence really feels like. Now I know how to fill it." Then I got in the car, turned the key, and drove off. Not away from something, but toward everything waiting beyond the noise. Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories.